podcast with Dallas Holm. Here we are.
And Jennifer, once again.
Yeah.
Always look forward to it.
We're back. We are going to be talking about probably your most well-known song today. Take a guess. Rise Again. Sure some of you said that. First recorded 1977?
Actually, we recorded it in 76, November of 76. We just had put the group together. Of course, the great story of that is, especially with that particular song, we had just formed as a group, Tim and LaDonna Johnson, Randy Adams, myself. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we got to have some music, got to have some songs. I'm a songwriter. That had never been real difficult for me. I don't mean it to sound like, I just crank them out, but I could sit down pretty much with a piece of paper and a pencil and start writing something. Songwriting was something that just came very, very easily to me. Doesn't as much anymore. I've used up a lot of ideas. And I don't think I took it for granted. It was just something that the Lord had apparently given me to do that flowed very easily from within. So as we anticipated having a group, I thought, I need to write some new music. So one day I got out, I'm kind of old school, got out my yellow pad, my pencil, and sat down. Okay, I need to write some songs. I couldn't think of a thing. I was just absolutely, talk about writer's block.
Yeah, no joke.
I was just
frustrating.
Zero. I'd sit there, I'd get up and walk around, I'd go, kind of clear your brain. Okay, come on, let's get with it. Nothing. Finally got to be pretty frustrating. So at some point in that whole process, I did what I, of course, should have done in the first place, was just really stopped in prayer, kind of a desperate sort of, Lord, we've got to have some music here, and I'm just not coming up with anything. I remember in the course of the prayer, I don't remember anything else I said in that prayer, but I do remember at one point, I actually said, Lord, if you were singing, what would you say? And as hokey as this might sound, I imagine Jesus, as we all kind of see Jesus with the robe and the long hair and the beard, up on a stage with a guitar, that was sort of my mental image. What would Jesus say if he was in that place, singing? I didn't hear any voices out of heaven. There were no lightning bolts or thunderclaps or, goosebumps or anything. But I can tell you that I wrote Rise Again just like taking dictation. It was about a 10-minute, maybe 15-minute process. The words, the music, no corrections, no changes. I just wrote, go ahead, drive the nails in my hands, laugh at me where you stand. And I remember when it was done, I looked at it, I looked at those lyrics, and I thought, this is something special. In all the songs I've written, I can only think of probably 3 songs that came that way, that just came... the best way I can put it is just like taking dictation.
Yeah.
I didn't hear a voice. It wasn't anything like that. I wouldn't want anybody to get the wrong idea that I'm saying, I had a vision or I heard a voice. I didn't. But I know how I write songs. It's a process. It's, now that word doesn't work, scratch that, let's try this. Sometimes they come relatively fast, sometimes they don't. I've taken as long as 2 years to finish a song. This one, 10, 50 minutes, it was just there. And I knew when it was finished that it was something special. I remember when Tim and LaDonna came the first time and we met to talk about forming a group, and I played it on the piano. I'm pretty basic piano, just kind of chord enough to play the song. And I played it for them, we sang it. They're excellent vocalists. They've done a lot of backup and singing with other groups, and they just found their parts, sang along, and as we sang in 3-part harmony on that chorus, it was like, ooh, this is nice. So when we were done with it one time, then I said, Tim, why don't you play? Because he's going to be the piano player. Tim is an excellent, seriously good piano player and singer. And LaDonna's a fabulous vocalist. And Tim just kind of sat down for a minute, and then he kind of did this run sort of thing, which now is sort of, I have people tell me, I have people tell me, I remember where I was the first time I heard the intro to Rise Again. We sang it, and I think we all had a sense of, this is something really special. Then the first time we sang it for some of our family and friends on Twin Oaks Ranch, which is where we lived then with the David Wilkerson ministry, I can remember the response was always the same, and you actually hear it on the live album. We finished the song, and there's this pause, this silence. It's almost like people don't know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
I think part of that was because, I don't know, at that time, I couldn't remember ever hearing a song from a first-person point of view. This is Jesus himself saying these words. I've taken a little abuse for that. I've had some people, I remember there was a author of a book, I don't even remember what the book was, but he felt that he needed to take me on in that, that I supposed or presumed that I could say what Jesus was saying, and he referenced it as in a rather belligerent style. Jesus says, go ahead, drive. I didn't get any kind of attitude thing about it. I was just saying, this is basically what Jesus said. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, but he offered himself up. So it was a very different experience. It was a different song in that it really was from a first person point of view. I think that got people's attention. But I think more than anything, not to be mystical about it, I just think it was one of those songs, and there's certainly been many songs and continue to be that, the only way I know how to state it, that I'm comfortable with, is that God anoints certain things.
Absolutely.
He places a special, if you will, not because I'm special, God is God. He can do what he wants. He is who he is, and he does what he does. But there's no question there are historical sermons, Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. There's sermons that I don't think there's any other way you can articulate it, that God just says, this is going to be historical. I'm going to use this.
For this time and this place and this moment.
You're the person. And here's the frightening thing. Some of the people that God has used, when I say you're the person, that's not to suggest in any way that, oh boy, I must have been a real favorite of God.
Yeah, no.
Well, I look back and I go, I was so flawed. I was so immature. I had so many rough edges. I don't even, in some way, I don't even like who I was when I look back. But God knew that. Yep. God knew what he was going to be up to and what it was going to take to conform me to the image of Christ and all the things he was going to. But at that time he said, I'm going to use you. I'm going to use this song. I have no other way to put it. I'm so glad he did, because it certainly has been a most effective song to minister to people in so many different ways. But then it opened the door. It really just threw the doors wide open for our ministry, even on an international level. Just that song just burst the doors open for then what songs followed that I wrote and sang and album and so forth suddenly had a tremendous stage platform, from which to minister.
So tell me, how many middle school grammar teachers have you had write in or call or talk to you about Ain't No Power on Earth?
Yeah, I took criticism for that, because ain't a word, as we all know.
And it's a double negative.
Right, double negative. And it's Jesus. Would Jesus say ain't? Again,
I'm just joking.
Oh, I know, but that's a great question, because I did. I had different people. They're always, sometimes they say Christians are funny people, but they ain't real funny.
Right.
Because within the Christian community, there just seem to be people that feel it's their calling, if not their gifting, to search out and point out and dispute every wrong thing that someone says, does, thinks, writes, sings, whatever.
Agitators.
Exactly. So when ain't was in there, there's this certain little group that Jesus wouldn't have said ain't. Why did you use the word ain't? Which later on I did change it, just because another album we'll talk about in a moment. After I wrote Rise Again, I wrote an entire musical, really as an extension of that song, entitled His Last Days. Well, it was a little more, it wasn't a contemporary group. It was now a little more classical in nature, orchestra. It was a drama. So I changed it from ain't to there's no power, contraction, there is no power.
Right.
I'm sure the people that didn't like ain't were happy about that. To me, it didn't make a difference. It wasn't an issue. I wrote the song. It worked well. I think by saying ain't, that you have to go back within the culture at that time in '76, singing to largely youth audiences, young people
it was
on
probably
the
an
beaches,
attention getter.
in colleges. Hey, someone's talking like I talk. They're not singing old hymns. Here's a song. This is Jesus, but and I don't, honestly, I don't, not to excuse it, I don't have a problem with it. I really don't care that much. If other people have a problem with ain't, they'll probably get over it, or they won't. But, Jesus in his day in teaching in parables, parable teaching was considered a very, very low base form of communication. That's what the common people did. That's what the fishermen did. That's what the tax gatherers, they told stories, they made up things. That's how they exchanged in dialogue. So he used a very common form of language to communicate what now we look at as Holy Scripture.
Right.
So I don't think ain't is that
Yeah.
big a stretch. I don't think it's really an issue. I personally don't think Jesus probably had a problem with it at all,
Yeah.
apparently.
Apparently not. Yeah. Okay, so the first one it was on was this Dallas Holm Praise Live, which I showed you a minute ago. And when you are able to see He Knew Me Then podcast on this episode compilation of podcasts, we talk a lot about this project. So go listen to that because you can hear where it was recorded, when, the venue, all that. Then His Last Days, what you just referred to. This is the Easter miracle. Not miracle.
It is an Easter miracle.
It's an Easter miracle.
It's a musical about the miracle.
Yes, that you wrote. And we have done a video of this, a DVD. I don't think we have either of those anymore, but you can download this entire project. We will keep that up on the website for a few more months. We usually offer it around Easter, and people love it.
After I wrote Rise Again, because it was such a unique experience, and especially, again, because it was from this first-person point of view, that the thought of that whole experience just kept, even if the song was out and, okay, Rise Again's been out a year or two now, it still really challenged my thinking. I never really detached from that. And I began to think, what was it like in the minds of the others? Peter, Mary Magdalene, the disciples, the Roman centurion. What were they thinking? What was that like from their first-person point of view, observing the last days of Christ on earth? And I really thought about that a long time, and I spent a good deal of time studying all the Gospels and praying. Every day I'd start just seeking the Lord in prayer. Help me to understand your word. Help me as I study. I would read the Gospels, restudy them, make notes. Then I would attempt to write songs as well as narration for this musical to where it finally came together. And a friend of mine, Ken Berg, who produced the Zola Levitt show for years and has produced several movies, a very, very talented, longtime friend. When he heard it, he immediately, I want to make that into a movie. So he put together a partnership, not with us. I really, I mean, I wrote it and I worked with Ken as far as going over to Israel and doing the narration. They hired professional actors and camera crew. And I think it was about 85, filmed the movie His Last Days over in Israel. Wonderfully powerful, beautifully done musical movie. And like Jennifer said, it is available. You can download it. But that was an extension of that project, His Last Days, which there again, it's one of those things that God really blessed. Actually, people at the record company who were in charge of more of the choral end of things really discouraged us from doing it. Oh, this will never work. Musicals have to be big, orchestrated, choir. There's kind of a standard what a musical looks like this, sounds like this. This isn't. This is very different. It's very solo-oriented. It's ensemble. It's smaller. When all the naysayers were done, we came out with this. It was highly successful. And I've got a picture in my office right now. There was a Catholic group that did this for years, toured with it for years. They finally did their last presentation last year. There was also an off-Broadway production of this. A lot of the Broadway actors that are Christians, during the Easter season, the typical Broadway shows kind of shut down for a period of time. And there was a lady that took this musical and got the Christian actors and actresses from Broadway to do an off-Broadway production of His Last Days. And I think it ran for, I want to say 9 years. I don't know if that's right. She contacted me the last year they were doing it. Is there any way you could come up? We'd love for you to come up and see what we've done. And I wasn't able at the time. But God used it in a lot of ways that I never thought of. So that was, I've often said of all the, I think I've done 38 albums, written, quite a few songs. I'm as personally pleased with and proud of the Last Days project as anything I've ever done, because it was so different than anything I've ever done. And one of my favorite songs on there is actually Mary's song.
Yeah, mine too.
I'm not a woman, so how do you write something from a woman's, let alone Jesus' mother point of view? But as Mary sings, is this the boy I raised? Is this the son I knew? Is this the one I've loved? Why can't you love him too? It's very emotional, very, it's a mother. We forget sometimes this is Jesus, the Son of God, but he's also Mary's little boy.
Yeah.
You know, so to explore that and write that song was extremely, remains one of the high points in my writing ministry. So I hope you're able to download the movie and see it. I think it'll
Well, not
be a
the
blessing
movie.
to
You can download the audio.
The audio, yeah.
The project.
Yeah.
And then Rise Again was released one more time on Beyond the Curtain, and this was a different intro. I mean, a different sound altogether. It doesn't have the piano intro. It's more
Yeah, it was a completely different
right?
different arrangement. Part of the reason was this song, for lack of a better way to put it, the song just wouldn't die. I actually have a plaque, and I think it's from the Singing News. Singing News was more Southern gospel. They have a magazine they send out, been around for years, very nice folks, and I was never really in the Southern gospel thing. I love good Southern gospel music, but I didn't operate or minister within that musical framework. But they sent me this plaque that says, for an unprecedented 48 months on the record charts. And I actually called someone. I said, thank you so much. I so appreciate this, but I think you made a mistake. I think you meant 48 weeks. And they said, no, there's no mistake. It's been on the charts for 4 years. Which I don't think that'll ever happen again, only because right about that time, charting and how we followed Christian music, it all changed. So, you know, now if a song gets for whatever charts, I mean, I honestly, don't get me started, but I think we do too much that copies the world. We get so concerned about who's the best, who's the first, who's on the chart, who's it's so meaningless. I wasn't even aware of that till they sent this to me, and I thought, oh, no, you messed up. I think you meant 48 weeks, but thank you, it's very nice of you. They said, no, it's been on the charts for 4 years. This will never happen again. So when we did this album, actually this was, I was with the Benson Record Company in Nashville for many years, and then I did...
Let's see what year this is.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I don't remember.
Gosh, I'm needing readers now too. If I remember correctly, it was 89,
that
something
sounds
like
about
that.
right. Because I went to, I did 4 projects with Word Records, and this was one of them. That may have been the first one I did with them. I don't remember for sure, but even going with it, which that said something, because when you go with from one record company to another one, generally they really want to retool, refashion. I mean, to take something you've done over, unless it was a really well-known song, which Rise Again was, but. Yeah, they wanted to redo it. Let's cut that one again. So a totally different arrangement, different key. By that time, I had gotten old enough that I couldn't sing in the stratosphere like I used to. When you listen to the original Rise Again, my wife had it on recently. I came in the house, and she just happened to have it playing, and I was like, who is that guy singing a G up there? And I can still sing those notes, but not like I used to.
My kids will say that too. Whoa, Grandma can sing high.
I've had a lot of people through the years that, of course, Rise Again has been sung and recorded by a lot of people, but a lot of times they come up and say, what were you thinking? I wanted to sing it, but I couldn't sing it.
No joke. Okay, well, that brings up a good point. I don't know how many years ago, but Bob Dylan sang Rise Again, and my husband worked very hard to find a copy of that for you to hear. He had that, and then most recently, Brad Paisley released it just on Instagram. He was just sitting down with his guitar and a couple of other musicians, and he sang it. And anybody else that you know of that people would recognize?
Well, I don't know. It's been cut by a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, someone said, look on YouTube and see Rise. Just look up Rise Again. It was Jeffrey, our son, your brother.
Yeah, my brother.
Some years ago, he said, Dad, have you ever looked on YouTube, see what your songs? And I didn't know what YouTube was. So we went on Rise Again. My goodness, page after page of people that create little music videos around your song and everything else. But in looking at that, I did find that cut of Bob Dylan. It's actually a bootleg copy, which I love, because I grew up in Minnesota, same as Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Dylan was from Hibbing, Minnesota. And before I became a Christian, when I played in bands, we did a lot of songs by the Byrds. I love the Byrds. Mr. Tambourine Man, Chimes of Freedom, all those are Bob Dylan songs. So I had this connection. I always appreciated Dylan's ability to just walk on a stage and absolutely mesmerize you. I think he would say it, I don't have the greatest singing voice in the world, but he had that storyteller presence. So I started hearing these rumors. I would hear people say, do you know Bob Dylan sings your song? And I thought, nah, you're probably hearing something that kind of sounds like. Well, we had a good friend who was a big Dylan fan, and she went out to, I think it was Phoenix, Arizona back in the 80s. Dylan was doing his Slow Train Coming album, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. And she was at the concert, and she said Dylan started out with something like, as only Bob Dylan could, kind of letting his audience know, there's been a change in my life, some of you heard about it. I'm not going to be singing a lot of the songs that maybe you've come to hear, so if you're disappointed, you might want to leave now. And she said, a few hundred people probably left because they came to hear what they wanted to hear, but Dylan wanted to sing what he wanted to sing right then, which is a lot of the Slow Train Coming. But he did, she said, he did rise again. So then Jason, your husband, my son-in-law, found a bootleg copy of it from a concert in Seattle, and he and I think it's Clyde King is singing backup the band, and it's my favorite version. It is my absolute, I mean, hundreds of people literally have recorded Rise Again. I've heard it in choirs, I've heard it in orchestras, I've heard it heavy metal.
Rap. Somebody recently did a rap version and sent it in.
It's, I mean, people have treated everyone, which I love. I just think, praise God, the message is going out there. But of all the versions I've heard, Dylan's is my favorite because he gets it. It's that fine line between, you can just hear Bob Dylan saying, go ahead, drive the nails in my hands, laugh at me. I mean, it's just like, do what you want. I am who I said I am, and so the power of that is just astonishing. And then, just a few days ago, someone sent me this Instagram, which I had heard some years ago. My brother was watching something on television, and he said, Brad Paisley knows Rise Again. He said, I saw something, I think it was on the Grand Ole Opry, and he was saying, I want to sing my favorite Easter song, and he sang Rise Again. So he's apparently known it for a while and done it off and on. I think there's a version of he and Joe Diffie doing it as a duet. But he just did it this last Easter, just a small cut of it. And,
That's really neat.
In all my humility, it's like, what am I thinking? I'm seeing Brad Paisley, one of my all-time favorite artists. Am I going, it doesn't matter? Oh, it matters.
No, it's cool.
Like, I mean, it was so cool. I've often said, because people have asked you the years, what's the most rewarding aspect of what you do? Well, number one, when someone comes to faith in Christ because of a song you sang, something you said, concert they went to. Probably second to that is someone doing your songs. When someone takes what you've done and now they take it to their audience, which might, and most of the times is a totally different audience that I'll never get to sing in front of.
That's right.
Brad Paisley's fans are probably never going to come to a Dallas Holm concert, but he takes that song and he sings it to his fan base. All of a sudden, the ripple effect of that is just,
That's like another one of your songs, Chain of Grace.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're
the gospel going
linked together
and dispersing.
Yeah, that was very, very cool. So
neat.
I went on YouTube not too long ago. I was looking for something. I think I was looking up. A friend of ours was over, and I was looking up trying to find that cut of Bob Dylan doing it. Well, then, as it is on YouTube, you go to one thing, and then 10 more pop up. Well, all of a sudden, it went into a whole group of. You have to be so careful these days to say whatever's politically correct. I don't know. It was Black church, which it's always been Black church to me, and I love it. There were all these YouTube videos of various Black family groups, choirs, soloists, all doing Rise Again. And it was just so cool to think that that segment, that culture, and it is a culture, how the African American Christian body worships musically. There's a uniqueness, there's a wonderful freedom, and to see that my song got in there, and people that had probably never invite Dallas Holm to come and sing that song. I mean, I don't know, they didn't know who I am, but I haven't been invited to many Black churches, but they were just singing it one after the other. It's just so blessed me. I thought, thank you, Lord, that I've been able to have an inroad there into a culture that I love and admire, especially musically. And you know this, I love blues. I mean, that's probably my favorite style of music. And if you trace blues back far enough, gospel music and blues are very, very similar. and it comes mostly out of the African American culture and the terrible history of slavery and all that. But kind of that thing, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good, you know, because out of this terribly evil, unfortunate circumstance of slavery comes, for me, the most phenomenal style of music ever, which is, and I know there's a lot of trashy blues, a lot of bad blues, but that blues vibe, slide guitar, that honest, raw, crying out to God or laying out your woes, that's as good as it gets for me. So to know that I've had a opportunity musically to have some part in that culture and that experience with a song was just really, really cool, very rewarding to me.
Well, and proof that God anointed the song, like we said at the beginning. He's had plans and purposes for it, and little is much when God is in it.
Stuff
and he
I'd
was
have never thought
obviously
about.
in it.
Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you again.